Anxiety is not a personal defect, a psychological glitch, or evidence that something has gone wrong in your life. It is the natural byproduct of being a conscious human being in a world defined by uncertainty, instability, and forces far beyond individual control. Stoicism begins here, not with comfort, but with honesty. It refuses to soften reality to protect your feelings, because it understands that anxiety grows strongest in the gap between what is real and what you believe reality should be. Most modern approaches to anxiety start by trying to convince you that your fears are irrational, exaggerated, or unnecessary. But Stoicism takes a different route. It acknowledges that the world is genuinely dangerous in certain ways, that loss is inevitable, that plans fail, people change, bodies weaken, and security dissolves without warning. Anxiety, in this sense, is not an error. It is an ancient survival response reacting to a world that has never promised safety. The Stoic cure does not involve pretending otherwise. Instead, it challenges the expectation that life owes you certainty. Anxiety intensifies when the mind secretly believes that stability is the default state of existence, and chaos is an exception. Stoicism dismantles this belief. Chaos is not a malfunction of the universe, it is its operating condition. When this truth is resisted, anxiety becomes chronic. When it is accepted, anxiety begins to shift from panic to vigilance. This shift matters. Panic paralyzes, vigilance prepares. Stoicism trains the mind to stop interpreting uncertainty as a threat to identity and start seeing it as a neutral condition that demands judgment and response. Much of anxiety is not fear of pain itself, but fear of the meaning we assign to pain. We fear what suffering might say about us, about our future, about our worth, about whether we are capable of enduring what lies ahead. Stoicism cuts through these narratives by grounding the mind in what is actually happening rather than what might happen. Anxiety collapses time, dragging imagined futures into the present and forcing the body to respond as if danger is immediate. Stoicism restores temporal order. It insists that the future does not exist yet and therefore cannot harm you now. This is not denial, it is precision. The Stoic does not say the future will be fine. The Stoic says the future is not here. Your task exists only in the present moment, and anxiety loses strength when it is denied access to hypothetical suffering. By anchoring attention to what is currently required, rather than what is feared, Stoicism removes the fuel anxiety depends on. It does not eliminate anxious sensations, but it strips them of authority. The mind learns that fear can exist without dictating action. Over time, this separation weakens the anxious response itself. Stoicism does not promise relief through reassurance. It promises stability through alignment with reality. When the mind stops demanding that life be predictable, anxiety no longer feels like a personal failure. It becomes information, not condemnation. And information, when handled correctly, does not overwhelm, it clarifies. At the heart of Stoic philosophy is a principle so simple that it is often underestimated, yet so disruptive that most people unconsciously resist it. The division between what is within your control and what is not. Anxiety flourishes precisely where this division is ignored or misunderstood. When you assume responsibility for outcomes, reactions, timelines, and circumstances beyond your influence, the nervous system remains in a constant state of alert, scanning for threats it cannot neutralize. Stoicism does not remove responsibility from life, it refines it. You are responsible for your intentions, your efforts, your decisions, and your conduct. You are not responsible for how events unfold. This distinction feels unsettling at first, because it removes the comforting illusion that enough worrying might prevent disaster. Anxiety often masquerades as preparation. The mind tells itself that constant concern is necessary, that vigilance must never rest, that letting go is equivalent to negligence. Stoicism exposes this as a misunderstanding of agency. Worrying does not create control, it simulates it. The Stoic cure for anxiety involves withdrawing energy from this simulation and reinvesting it where influence actually exists. This reallocation is not passive. It demands discipline. It requires the mind to repeatedly release outcomes after effort has been applied. This is difficult because the ego craves confirmation. It wants guarantees that its labor will be rewarded. Stoicism denies these guarantees without denying meaning. You act because action aligns with virtue, not because it ensures success. Anxiety diminishes when the mind stops equating uncertainty with danger. The Stoics understood that control is binary. Either something is within your power, or it is not. There is no halfway state where worrying improves probability. When this boundary is respected, mental energy stabilizes. You prepare carefully, act decisively, and then release attachment to results. Anxiety weakens not because risk disappears, but because the mind no longer treats risk as a personal indictment. Failure, rejection, and loss are no longer interpreted as evidence of inadequacy, but as neutral outcomes in an uncontrollable system. This reframing is powerful. Anxiety thrives on personalization. Stoicism depersonalizes events without dehumanizing experience. It does not say outcomes do not matter. It says they do not define you. When identity is no longer tied to success or approval, anxiety loses leverage. The Stoic mind becomes resilient not because it expects victory, but because it expects uncertainty. This expectation is not pessimism. It is preparedness. Anxiety fades when the mind stops bracing for betrayal by reality and starts cooperating with it. The Stoics believed that inner stability comes from correct judgment, not favorable circumstances. When judgment aligns with what can and cannot be controlled, anxiety no longer has fertile ground to grow. It may still appear, but it cannot dominate. It has been placed in its proper category, a sensation, not a sentence. Modern culture treats emotional discomfort as a problem to be solved immediately, and this belief quietly fuels anxiety by teaching the mind that distress itself is unacceptable. Stoicism dismantles this belief by treating discomfort as a normal, expected component of human life. The Stoics did not assume emotional calm as a default state. They assumed fluctuation. Anxiety, fear, sadness, and anger were seen as natural responses to impressions the mind receives. What mattered was not the appearance of these emotions, but whether reason was allowed to intervene before action was taken. Stoicism does not attempt to suppress anxiety. It trains the mind to coexist with it without surrendering autonomy. This distinction is critical. Anxiety becomes debilitating only when it convinces you that it must be obeyed. Stoicism restores agency by teaching that emotions are experiences, not commands. The presence of fear does not require retreat. The presence of anxiety does not require avoidance. This philosophy reframes emotional regulation as behavioral sovereignty rather than emotional control. You do not wait to feel calm before acting. You act well regardless of how you feel. Over time, this practice weakens anxiety's predictive power. Much anxiety is rooted in the belief that discomfort will escalate into catastrophe. Stoicism disproves this belief through exposure. When the mind repeatedly witnesses itself functioning despite anxiety, the association between fear and danger dissolves. The Stoics also emphasized voluntary discomfort as a training ground for resilience. By choosing manageable hardship, the mind learns that discomfort is survivable. Anxiety thrives on fragility narratives, on the belief that you are not equipped to endure difficulty. Stoicism methodically dismantles this narrative by accumulating evidence of endurance. Each moment of composed action, under pressure, becomes proof that anxiety exaggerates threat. This process is gradual and unspectacular, but deeply effective. Stoicism does not offer instant relief, because it is not designed to soothe. It is designed to strengthen. Emotional strength reduces anxiety not by numbing sensitivity, but by increasing tolerance. The Stoic does not aim to feel safe. They aim to be capable. Capability breeds calm. When the mind trusts its ability to respond to adversity, anxiety loses its urgency. The Stoics also rejected the idea that happiness is the highest goal of life. They prioritized virtue, character, and coherence. This shift removes the pressure to feel good at all times. Anxiety often arises from the belief that discomfort indicates failure. Stoicism replaces this belief with a different standard: integrity. You are not failing because you feel anxious. You fail only if you abandon reason, values, or responsibility in response to that anxiety. This reframing alone can dramatically reduce self-inflicted distress. Anxiety no longer signals inadequacy. It signals challenge. And challenges, unlike threats, invite engagement rather than panic. Toxic positivity intensifies anxiety by denying its legitimacy, forcing individuals to suppress fear while pretending to feel calm. Stoicism succeeds where positivity fails because it allows anxiety to exist without granting it dominance. The Stoics understood that emotional reactions arise automatically in response to impressions, but suffering intensifies when the mind judges these reactions as unacceptable. When you tell yourself that you should not feel anxious, you introduce a second layer of distress: self-rejection. Stoicism removes this layer by distinguishing between involuntary emotion and voluntary judgment. Anxiety is not a moral failure. It is a physiological and cognitive response shaped by perception. What matters is whether you allow anxiety to dictate your interpretation of reality. Stoicism trains the mind to examine anxious thoughts with detachment rather than hostility. It does not argue with fear emotionally. It interrogates it rationally. Is this fear proportional? Is it based on present facts or imagined futures? Is action required? Or is this merely noise? These questions ground the mind. Anxiety thrives in vagueness. Stoicism introduces specificity. When fear is made precise, it often shrinks. The Stoics believe that much suffering originates not from events themselves, but from the opinions formed about them. Anxiety frequently speaks in absolutes, predicting irreversible outcomes and catastrophic meanings. Stoicism dismantles these narratives by reminding the mind that events are transient and interpretation is optional. This does not mean denying consequences. It means refusing to exaggerate them. The Stoic does not minimize loss, but they refuse to magnify it beyond reality. This restraint stabilizes emotional response. Stoicism also teaches that anticipation of suffering often exceeds suffering itself. Anxiety rehearses pain in advance, draining emotional resources before they are needed. Stoicism interrupts this rehearsal by refusing to suffer twice. You deal with difficulty when it arrives, not before. This principle alone can dramatically reduce chronic anxiety. The mind is reminded that it has always been capable of responding to reality as it unfolds. Stoicism restores trust in this capacity. Over time, anxiety loses its authority because it is repeatedly proven inaccurate. The Stoic does not silence fear. They outgrow it by refusing to feed it with speculation and judgment. Calm emerges not from denial, but from familiarity with reality as it is, not as it is feared to be. The Stoic cure for anxiety is not a method to eliminate fear, but a discipline that transforms how fear is experienced and interpreted. It is not fast, comforting, or emotionally indulgent, which is why it endures. Stoicism teaches that inner stability is achieved not by controlling external events, but by governing internal responses. Anxiety loses power when the mind no longer treats uncertainty as an emergency. This shift requires repeated practice, not insight alone. Stoicism is lived, not affirmed. Each time you act with clarity despite anxiety, you weaken its influence. Each time you accept uncertainty without resistance, you reduce its intensity. Over time, this creates a quiet confidence rooted not in optimism, but in competence. Stoicism does not promise happiness, because happiness is fragile. It promises steadiness, which is durable. When you stop demanding that life be predictable, anxiety stops feeling like betrayal. When you stop demanding comfort, discomfort stops feeling like catastrophe. Stoicism reframes life as a sequence of challenges rather than threats. Challenges invite response. Threats demand avoidance. Anxiety thrives on avoidance. Stoicism dissolves it through engagement. This does not mean reckless exposure, but measured participation in reality as it exists. The Stoic accepts that fear may accompany action, but refuses to let it determine direction. This refusal is not aggressive, it is calm and deliberate. Over time, anxiety adapts to this boundary. It no longer escalates, because escalation no longer produces obedience. Calm arises not because the world becomes safe, but because the mind becomes steady. Stoicism offers no slogans, no guarantees, no emotional shortcuts. It offers something rarer, a framework for living honestly in an uncertain world. Anxiety fades into proportion when it is no longer treated as an enemy or a guide, but as a temporary sensation within a much larger capacity for reason and choice. This is the Stoic cure. It does not remove chaos. It teaches you how to stand inside it without losing yourself.